They say your greatest win should feel like standing on a mountain peak, letting the wind and sunlight and cheers wash over you. But that wasn't how it felt for me. On the day Onyx Tech announced a record $3.22 billion in revenue, the highest in company history, I stood off to the side of the glittering conference hall holding a flimsy paper plate of catered food, watching a stage full of men applaud one another for something I had built. Not one of them said my name. Not once. It had taken 4 years. 4 years of 14-hour days slashing burn rates, rebuilding product development from the inside out, and dragging our prehistoric systems out of the technological dark ages. When I joined Onyx Tech, the company was barely breathing, hemorrhaging clients and credibility after a series of disastrous launches. I was hired quietly, no announcement, no applause. Director of Strategic Operations, which was corporate shorthand for the woman we hope can save us. And I did. I architected a modular rollout strategy that cut onboarding time in half. I spearheaded a complete DevOps overhaul, pushed microservices while everyone else clung desperately to monolithic systems. I made enemies along the way. You don't change a culture without drawing blood. But I won more battles than I lost. And in the end, I delivered exactly what I promised: stability, growth, market dominance. Our largest client, a multinational logistics firm, once told our executive team, "Jenny's group doesn't just deploy code, they deploy confidence." I wrote that sentence on a sticky note and kept it on my monitor for years. So yes, I expected something, a mention, a nod, a quiet thank you. Instead, I got an email. The subject line landed like a slap across my face: compensation change notice. For a moment, I assumed it was a mistake, maybe a badly worded bonus confirmation, but it wasn't. It was a reduction, a 15% salary cut, adjusted to better align with internal equity following organizational realignment. I stared at my screen while champagne glasses clinked around me. On stage, the CEO, Martin Bellum, basked under the lights, speaking about visionaries, risk-takers, and the next generation of leadership. Behind him, a slideshow rotated through portraits of key contributors. I wasn't there. No photo, no acknowledgement. I stood less than 20 feet from the stage and felt completely invisible. No, worse than invisible. I felt erased. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The shift was subtle, like the ground moving under your feet before you realize you're falling. Meetings disappeared from my calendar. Strategy sessions I once led were reassigned. Work that flowed through me was quietly rerouted to a shiny new entity called the Office of Digital Transformation. A cute name, even cuter once I learned who would be running it: Samantha Vellum, the CEO's daughter, fresh out of Stanford with a philosophy degree and a LinkedIn profile overflowing with titles like thought leader and vision strategist. I'd met her twice, once at a fundraiser where she asked if we used blockchain for our APIs. I explained that APIs weren't currencies. Apparently, she didn't appreciate the clarification. The worst part wasn't the pay cut or the slow fade into professional irrelevance. It was realizing this had all been decided long before. Fixers are useful only until things stop breaking. After that, they're expendable. At the celebration, when they unveiled our explosive new client growth chart, complete with built-in fireworks, someone pressed a champagne flute into my hand. I didn't drink it. I just watched the bubbles rise and vanish before reaching the surface. Like me, no one noticed when I left early. I walked past the valley, heels pinching, shoulders rigid beneath my blazer. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but something cold and deliberate settled deep in my gut, because I knew something they didn't. The system powering our SaaS platform, the one responsible for everything from client authentication to data synchronization, had a rhythm only I understood, and it was starting to falter. They thought they could cut me out. They had no idea what was coming. The HR office always smelled like lemon disinfectant and stale coffee. Too clean, too quiet, too intentional, like a waiting room before a controlled demolition. The email had said it was just a quick check-in about my new role, excited to collaborate on next steps. Lena from HR greeted me with a tight, fragile smile and gestured toward the small round table instead of her desk. Power dynamics. Side by side meant conversation. Across a desk meant verdict. She spoke about my next chapter, my experience, a mentorship-oriented position, advisory, supporting emerging leadership without the pressure of ownership, less execution, more legacy, a graceful burial wrapped in corporate language. She mentioned leadership alignment, transformation phases. Nothing would change overnight, she promised, even though everything already had. On the 7th floor, the glass conference room that used to be mine glowed with activity. For a moment, I saw Chloe, last summer's intern, sitting in my chair, Samantha Vellum beside her, nodding confidently. No one glanced toward the door as I walked past. By mid-afternoon, my inbox flooded with handoff emails. My projects, my processes, my files reassigned to unfamiliar names, CC'd to me as an afterthought. Collaboration that felt like exile. At 3 o'clock, my badge stopped opening executive-level servers. At 4, I was removed from the director's sync. At 5, my new title populated the system, Senior Strategic Advisor. Legacy, again. My office was gone. An IT technician asked if I needed help relocating to a shared pod, like an old filing cabinet. I spent the rest of the week at a temporary desk with no plaques, no letters, no history. The woman who had saved the company reduced to a silhouette. But I wasn't finished, not yet, because they made a quiet, fatal mistake. They assumed the system they still depended on was finished, stable, mature. They forgot that it was still evolving and that only I knew how to read its pulse as it began to skip. That night, my house was silent in the way collapse leaves silence. The celebration, the meeting, the HR ambush, all of it stripped pieces of me away as I sat in my dim living room, clock ticking, refrigerator humming, street lights flickering through the window. Boxes of old projects surrounded me, proof that my work had once mattered. I found it without searching. The folder labeled ONX Framework V1 Confidential. My handwriting, my careful script. Inside was a printed copy of the original licensing agreement I drafted when I built the modular operating system Onyx still relied on. Back then, no one believed the company would survive the year. Our software stack was a stitched-together nightmare of abandoned vendors and legacy junk. So I rebuilt it myself, using a third-party architecture licensed under my name. I paid for it personally because the company refused to approve the expense fast enough, and clients were already leaving. The terms were clear. License valid for 36 months. Renewal restricted to the original licensee. Failure to renew within 21 days would trigger full system lockout and deactivation of core services. I read the clause again and again. My signature sat at the bottom, not Onyx Tech, not Martin Vellum's, mine. They never updated it, too distracted by roadshows and rebrands. The expiration date was 19 days away. They had no idea that the platform serving every client across industries, currencies, and time zones had days from going dark unless I renewed it. I leaned back, paper trembling slightly in my hands. This wasn't sabotage, it wasn't revenge, it was consequence. They stripped my title, my authority, my access, but they forgot one thing. I still held the keys. I slid the folder back into the box and tucked it beneath the couch. I didn't need to bring it to work. I didn't need to warn anyone. Let them smile on stage. Let them promote Chloe and Samantha and every shiny new face they could find. Let them forget my name. In 21 days, the system would remember.
I didn't need a hoodie or a basement, no flickering monitors. This wasn't a movie. It was quieter than that. Cleaner. I sat at my home office desk, coffee cold beside me, and logged into the admin interface no one at Onyx had ever bothered to restrict. They took my team and my title, but not my credentials. They assumed the system belonged to them now. They were wrong. The platform's core was built on modular bridges I designed myself. Not outsourced, not borrowed. My code, my logic, my methods. When I licensed the architecture, I didn't give away the crown jewels. I rented them. Now I began reclaiming them carefully, line by line, function by function. Not deleting, not damaging, just removing what was never truly theirs. The first components I pulled were the API harmonizers, small background processes that kept data flowing cleanly across dashboards, syncing time zones, currencies, and timestamps without friction. Invisible. Essential. Without them, latency crept in. The next morning, reports loaded 5 seconds slower, then 15, then failed entirely for a handful of clients in Australia. I watched the logs populate, null return on sync cascade. Harmless words masking a structural fracture. By midweek, the sales dashboard froze mid-demo, Samantha's favorite tool. Her assistant posted in Slack, "Glitching again. Anyone know what's wrong with the client Delta tab?" They didn't. That tab relied on a memory optimization engine I wrote in my second year, experimental, undocumented, proprietary, mine. And now it was gone. Emails flew behind the scenes. Vendor latency was blamed. Engineering suggested clearing cache. One junior analyst even floated a DDS test by cybersecurity. No one checked the right place. No one asked me because I was just a legacy advisor now. Background noise. But the system knew me. It recognized my touch, and now it was responding. The glitches stayed small, isolated, intentional. This wasn't a storm, it was a drip. A leak in the ceiling no one notices until the roof collapses. I didn't feel proud or triumphant, but I did feel something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. Chloe started wearing heels to the office, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to sound important when she walked. You heard her before you saw her. Click, click, click. Punctuation marks announcing her arrival. She was still technically shadowing Samantha, but lately she'd begun introducing herself as the director's liaison. The role didn't exist, and no one corrected her. She'd started replying to emails meant for me, even stepped into one of the recurring syncs I used to run, presenting it as an opportunity to explore fresh perspectives. It wasn't malicious, not exactly, just overeager and ambitious, that clumsy, unsharpened kind of confidence that mistakes volume for competence. On Wednesday afternoon, I passed a breakout room and overheard her on a call. "I think we're going to sunset some of the legacy logic. It's creating data artifacts," she said brightly. I flagged the Ginny modules for review. The Ginny modules? I stopped walking. She said it like they were dusty leftovers from a forgotten era, outdated scraps to be swept aside so she could build her paper palace on clean ground. It was almost funny. Almost. Later that day, I walked into the analytics room, the glass-walled space with the massive dashboard that once pulsed with the heartbeat of our systems. Chloe was already there, leaning over error logs, firing off theories at an overwhelmed IT intern. I didn't announce myself. I stepped up behind her, leaned in, and said quietly that the data artifacts weren't coming from the modules. They were the result of disconnected bridge variables, something that only happened when the mapping layer was disabled. She blinked. "I didn't disable anything." "No," I said evenly, "but you told the team to stop loading the legacy reconcilers. Those are the mapping layer." She bristled, said she was told they weren't essential anymore. "By who?" I asked. She didn't answer. The intern shifted in his chair. I turned to him with a calm smile and explained that the system was reverting to default sync logic, which couldn't handle multi-point currency drift without the patch layer, which is why Q3 projections were returning null. He nodded, relieved. Chloe stayed frozen. I looked back at her and told her she might want to slow down before erasing other people's work, because some of us built this place from the ground up, and we didn't do it with glue sticks and buzzwords. She flushed, tried to recover, said she was just trying to optimize. Wasn't that the goal? I let the silence stretch a second too long, then told her to optimize all she wanted, but not to pretend she understood what she didn't, because that wasn't leadership, it was performance. I walked out. Behind me, the dashboard flickered. Another glitch added to the pile. Chloe didn't know it yet, but the system had already started rejecting her like a mismatched transplant, and when it failed, she'd be standing at the center of the wreckage, heels and all. By Friday, chaos had learned to walk. The glitches were no longer isolated. What began as small delays and occasional sync mismatches spread like cracks through tempered glass. Reports failed to compile. Forecasts looped into empty datasets. Dashboards glowed red, not with alerts, just confusion. Inputs that once moved like clockwork jammed mid-process, freezing half-finished visualizations across the floor. Engineers scrambled. Slack turned into a war zone of bug reports, tangled threads, and increasingly panicked emoji reactions. People threw around phrases like stack overflow, memory bleed, invisible bottleneck. No one could agree on a cause. Too many systems, too many hands. Leadership kept pushing forward anyway. Patch it, restart the node, roll it back. But it wasn't a bug, it was an unraveling, and I watched it from the outside, calm, quiet, detached. That weekend, an email landed in my inbox from Gary Kim, subject, not a coincidence, time-stamped Saturday, 10:03 p.m. Jenny, I know you're probably not checking these anymore. I heard what happened and I'm sorry, but I've been digging through the logs and this doesn't feel random. The degradation lines line up too cleanly. None of the new devs understand half the platform. Chloe's been stripping out your modules and now everything's collapsing. I'm not accusing, I just wanted you to know I see it. I read it twice, then deleted it. Not because of guilt, but because there was nothing left to explain. I wasn't in the system anymore. I wasn't in the meetings, the charts, the credits, the loop, and that absence was my greatest power. They tried to make me invisible, and now they were learning what it truly meant to live without me. The logs didn't lie, as fractures spread across departments like an untraceable virus. Sales blamed IT blamed product blamed legacy logic, while Chloe kept smiling in meetings as if it weren't her tower beginning to tip. The silence I left behind had grown deafening, and they still hadn't realized what or who was missing, but they would. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, clean and elegant, just like her. From Nora Lynn, subject, lunch, time, 8:13 a.m. Jenny, I've been following the Onyx situation. If you're free this week, I'd love to talk. I think it's time we revisited that conversation from last year. Lunch is on me. Bring your fire. Nora. Nora Lynn, CEO of Diamond, the woman who once offered me a leadership role when Diamond was just breaking into the enterprise space. An offer I'd turned down out of misplaced loyalty to Onyx and a need to fix things that didn't want fixing. She hadn't chased, just left the door open and walked away with the kind of confidence that lingers. We met at a quiet downtown cafe with heavy mugs and linen napkins, no laptops in sight, and Nora wore a navy suit that looked carved to her frame. She stood when she saw me, arms open, not like a corporate peer, but like someone who remembered who I was before they tried to rewrite me. You look taller, she said. Must be the burnout. It lifts your soul when you stop pretending you're fine. She laughed softly, mentioned turbulence, and we cut past small talk fast. I want to make you an offer, she said. Not a job, not a title, a runway. She'd watched what I built at Onyx, the clean, modular architecture, but more than that, she wanted the mind behind it.
You want to buy the system? I asked. I'd rather buy into it, she said, or partner with you to build something better, something fully yours. She'd fund the infrastructure. I'd lead the vision, define the product, the roadmap, the brand, own every piece, backed by her, and a team to make it real. It wasn't a pitch or a rescue. It was a resurrection. She wasn't asking me to join Diamond. She was asking if I was ready to build what they said could never exist, a company on my rules and values. I looked out the window at a world that kept moving without permission and realized what I felt wasn't bitterness or fear. It was freedom. The first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't calculating relevance inside someone else's machine, but imagining what I could build myself. Let's talk terms, I said. The Onyx building looked the same when I returned. Cold steel, blue glass, that hollow mural promising integrity. And I passed security, the new receptionist unnoticed, my badge still working as I rolled to the third-floor server room, a place that cared only about uptime and continuity. In the dry, humming air, I pulled a sealed envelope and a folded piece of thick cardstock from my bag. The clean, original blueprint of the system, the true skeleton no one else had ever seen whole. The letter was simple. This system was never hacked, never sabotaged. It was withdrawn. Ownership, after all, was more than a legal document. It's trust, and you broke it, which means I no longer owe you access to something you never respected. You will rebuild, you will recover, but it won't be on my back. Jenny Harper. I placed the letter beneath the diagram and stepped away as the servers blinked quietly behind me, unaware they had just become orphans. And as I left the room, I nearly collided with Chloe in the hallway, clipboard in hand, eyes wide with manufactured urgency, both of us freezing in place. "Jenny," she said, like she'd seen a ghost, looking me over, hair pulled tight, blazer too rigid, heels clicking slightly off rhythm. "You're here? Are you fixing something?" "No," I said softly. "I'm finishing something." She blinked, defensive, lifting her chin as she insisted they were stabilizing things, just legacy junk, nothing they couldn't untangle. And I stepped closer, telling her the truth, that she thought she was in control, thought she'd inherited something, but she hadn't lost me because she never had me. And the flinch that crossed her face was small but deep, the kind that echoes later. I walked away, the elevators feeling slower, or maybe I was simply ready, not angry or broken, just done, knowing Onyx Tech could erase my name from speeches, credits, and systems, but never the reality that the heart of their success was something they never understood and had now lost. The collapse didn't come all at once. It never does. It started quietly, like a fracture beneath polished marble, as customer service lines backed up, sync logs vanished across Asia-Pacific, European dashboards refused to load, and error reports fell like confetti until the infrastructure buckled. APIs timed out, recovery protocols failed because my scripts were gone, and the system grew confused, running a language it never learned. Panic spread at HQ. Fingers pointed. Slack burned with escalation messages. Chloe went silent. Samantha hid behind strategy. Martin Vellum burned through investor calls, and I watched calmly from my laptop, sipping tea, not hacking, just observing public logs and red flashing monitors as screenshots spread online. Clients walked, stock dropped, and the tower filled with shouting as they finally understood this wasn't sabotage, it was dependency. Invisible scaffolding they'd removed without knowing what held them up. And now, under cool blue lights in a packed auditorium, cameras hovering, vol looping silently on the screen as the future of adaptive intelligence, I stepped onto the stage, not to applause, but to surprise. Recognition flickered across a few faces, while others squinted and whispered, a name they hadn't heard in a while, but hadn't quite forgotten. I wasn't wearing a suit, just a simple black blazer, a soft blouse, and the ease of no longer needed permission to exist. No music, no hype, just me, a single spotlight, a breath, and then my voice. I didn't leave the system. Pause. 1,000 held breaths. I rebuilt it. The silence shattered, sharp and electric, followed by applause that wasn't polite or professional, but overwhelming, uncontainable, real. This was recognition. This was vindication. The screen behind me shifted to side-by-side diagrams, one labeled on extreme, the other VA, identical at first glance, until the differences emerged. Cleaner logic, smarter infrastructure, evolution rather than imitation. Online, the moment detonated. Hashtag Ginny Harper trended within the hour. She was the brain behind Onyx all along. Onyx collapses as she rises from the ashes. Salvix's secret weapon wasn't a product, it was a person. I didn't scroll through the comments because I didn't need to. The moment I stepped off the stage, Nora was waiting in the wings, eyes bright. That, she whispered, wasn't a launch. That was a reckoning. I smiled, not for them, but for me. For every late night no one saw, every boardroom dismissal, every stolen credit and rewritten report. I didn't burn their system down, I built something better, and this time my name wouldn't disappear. Chloe watched the live stream from her desk, frozen, my name and face filling the screen like something unreal as the announcement echoed through the sterile quiet of the Onyx office. It took a second to sink in. I hadn't vanished or crumbled or faded the way they assumed. I had simply outgrown them. Chloe felt something worse than anger or jealousy, regret. She hadn't meant to push me out, or at least she told herself that. They'd laughed together once, shared lattes during onboarding, and she had admired me, truly. But titles were handed out, ambition grew louder than gratitude, and she assumed I'd always be there, stable, safe, a fallback. She mistook proximity for power, thinking brilliance transferred by standing close, never realizing you earn your light or live in someone else's shadow. And now that shadow was gone. Headlines sang my name, Salvik stocks soared, Onyx sank, and Chloe sat in the same chair I once occupied, surrounded by wreckage she didn't know how to rebuild. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had taken myself back. The lesson was simple. Don't confuse grace for weakness, and never mistake quiet for insignificant. Some people don't shout, they rise. Jenny stood on the rooftop terrace of Vaugh's new headquarters, 4 floors of clean glass, curved wood, and intentional silence, built for thinkers, not talkers, the city humming below while the noise faded above. She watched her team through wide windows, designers, engineers, strategists who chose honesty over spectacle. Vau was thriving, securing its 3rd enterprise partnership, quietly courted for a global health infrastructure overhaul. Investors calling daily, the media calling her a visionary and disruptor, praise she no longer needed. The reward was simpler. She was free, respected, building without betrayal, her name on every blueprint, her rules, her vision. And when she entered a room, people listened because she had something worth hearing. Chloe remained at Onyx Tech, the office smaller now, quieter. The energy shifted like everyone pretending they hadn't watched the walls crack. She survived the fallout, barely, demoted after the 3rd client left, her title erased without announcement, her work reduced, meetings fewer, whispers following her like an ending already written. She wasn't angry at Ginny anymore. She replayed every silence, every moment she failed to speak, finally understanding Ginny hadn't just been a mentor or colleague, but a shield she let them dismantle. Now she watched Va from afar, through press releases and demos, sometimes thinking about reaching out just to say sorry, just to say, I didn't see you until it was too late. But she never typed the message. Some absences aren't meant to be filled. They're meant to be remembered.